being as resentful and angry as he is today. If Kratos wants to stop Atreus from ending up the same way, which is of course the main conflict of this entire story, he needs to stop being so selfish. Next, listen to the way Kratos says, "It is a curse."
I just realized. Veil is a monk zodiac, and Teosra is a zodiac monk. The very thing I tried not to ever do has happened. Lol. Ah, I'll live with it. I already made a save. I actually literally can't do anything but live with it.
Boy has been cursed. Again, a fantastic delivery by Christopher Judge. He put so much emotion into that line. The curse Kratos speaks of here is godhood itself. Kratos believes that being a god is a curse. This is a fascinating inversion of expectations. Most of us would think of godhood as being pretty awesome. Eternal life, tons of power, get to do whatever you want. Sounds pretty nice. But as we've already discussed in detail in this essay, that hasn't been Kratos' experience of godhood, or for basically any other god in the series. Being a god in the God of War series sucks. The classic line is that with great power comes great responsibility. The God of War's version of that line would be something like, with great power comes great tragedy, great consequences. The more power you have, the more power you have to destroy it. Not just everything around you, but to destroy yourself. Kratos believes that just by bringing Atreus into this world, he has cursed his son. Just by being born, his son has been destined to a life of tragedy. He loves his son so much, but he still has no clue how to prevent that terrible future from coming true. Next, let's watch the scene where Kratos reveals the truth to Atreus.
Who the hell are you anyway?
My talk with Freya. You think you understand, but you do not. Why'd you say nothing?
You said I was cursed. You think I'm weak because I'm not like you. I knew I was never what you wanted. But after all this, I thought maybe things were different.
You do not know everything, boy.
No. But at least I know the truth now.
Truth. Truth. I'm a god, boy. I'm another lad far from here. When I came to these shores, I chose to live as a man. But the truth is, I was born a god, and so were you. Boy, you have nothing to say.
Turn into an animal?
To an animal. No, I do not think so.
Mother knew? She was God too?
No, she was more from what she knew about true nature.
God. How did you wait so long to tell me?
I had hoped to spare you. Being a god, it can be a lifetime of anguish and tragedy. That is the curse.
I think it's better if I enter from the Abyssal Shrine.
What sorts of things can I do? Can I fly? Turn invisible?
Even after everything that's happened, what Freya said to him, Kratos
It's the
still
highest
wasn't
floors
going
where
to
all the
reveal
highest
truth to
pointed
Atreus
enemies
yet. He
are.
was actually
So.
still putting it off. It's not until Atreus delivers that heart.
Like the last kill quest, though, I
his
don't.
father doesn't want him. And of course,
I'm getting
that's what
lag
Atreus
again.
thinks. Kratos has never had a relationship with Atreus. He has avoided interacting with Atreus for fear of corrupting him, for fear of himself, fear of passing on that potential for rage and violence. But Atreus doesn't know that. All he sees is a father that doesn't seem to want anything to do with him. It's to correct this mistaken assumption, this further emotional harm he has inflicted on his son, that Kratos finally tells Atreus that he is a god. Kratos is a really flawed character. More than once in this game, he doesn't do the right thing until he is forced to by circumstances outside his control. He is admirable in that he does still ultimately choose to do the right thing, but it takes him a long time to get there, which is good writing. Characters confronting their flaws, either to overcome them or be overcome by them, makes for great storytelling. I absolutely love Atreus' response to being told that he is a god. Atreus is written to act and speak so maturely in this game that sometimes it's easy to forget that he's still a child, which is what you see here. His first response is, "Oh sweet, can I turn into an animal?" It's such a classic, goofy little kid sort of question. It also demonstrates a totally different perception of godhood. For Kratos, being a god is this terrible, awful, weighty affliction. But for Atreus, godhood could be fun. You could get to turn into an animal. That's why Kratos seems so surprised by Atreus' question.
Oh, sure, I meant to charge my Switch too so I can keep playing at school. Etrian Odyssey.
He's completely forgotten that there is a potential good side to being a god. It's also pretty funny that he answers by saying no. Obviously, we all know now that Atreus definitely can turn into an animal. However, this good side of being a god doesn't last for long. Immediately, all of Kratos' worst fears about Atreus learning that he is a god begin to come true. Atreus begins to lose his compassion, his friendliness, his desire to help others. He learns that he can do whatever he wants, that he can get away with being selfish and unkind, so that's exactly what he does. This is the curse that Kratos was speaking about, the corrupting power of being a god. The most dramatic example of this godly corruption appears when Atreus murders
I'm just gonna
when
abandon the
Atreus,
request
as
for
a
now.
god, callously wields the power over life and death.
I wanna
chooses
do
to
the
kill
quest.
an enemy who is already beaten, who poses no threat, for no reason other than petty revenge for childish insults. At that moment, Atreus even says, "We're gods. That means we can do whatever we want." But that's not the scene we're going to watch. Instead, we're going to watch this scene where Atreus berates Sindri, which I think, given the added context of what ends up happening to Sindri later, actually hits even harder. So here it is.
Ah! Well, don't go anywhere. I'll be with you in 2 shakes.
Father, can I tell him?
No.
Tell me what? Did you put this needle in your mouth? Oh, God. I'll vomit. I'm Okay, they all throw up on it.
It's nothing. Family matter.
Oh, I can tell you a thing or two about family matters. Oh.
Let me guess. Your brother isn't as talented as you, and his work is junk.
Those things are accurate. Your point?
It's all you ever talk about, over and over. Do something about it or shut up for it.
I see.
Yeah! We're sick of hearing about little people's little problems.
All right. I've heard enough. Let's have a look at your gear then.
This scene always breaks my heart. Sindri is such a nice person. He helps Kratos and Atreus constantly. Sure, he's a little bit annoying, but so is everyone. Before, Atreus was interested in Sindri's problems, curious about his life, wanted to be friends. But now that he's discovered that he is a god, Atreus thinks he's too important to have to listen to those little problems, that he is too big for this. He speaks callously, not just without any regard to the feelings of others, but actively trying to hurt Sindri's feelings. When I first played this game, I found this to be a genuinely upsetting change in Atreus' character. Before, Atreus had been such a ray of light and joy and fun in the so very often bleak and hopeless world of God of War. Through Atreus, I thought Kratos had potential to become a much better man. But instead, the opposite is happening. Through godhood, Atreus is quickly becoming just as ugly and selfish as every other god we've met in this series. Something else that bothered me the first time I played the game is Kratos' near total lack of reaction to the crappy way Atreus is behaving. For a long time, while Atreus is very clearly getting worse and worse, Kratos mostly just sits by and lets it happen. He doesn't really scold his son, doesn't discipline him. Mimir even comments on it at one point. After something ugly Atreus says in Tyr's temple, Mimir says, "Are we really just gonna let that sit there?" And I was asking the same thing. I was like, are we really gonna let it sit there? I kept asking myself, why doesn't Kratos do anything about this? Why doesn't he say anything? Why doesn't he stop this? But the truth is that Kratos has no clue how to stop this. He doesn't know how to stop godhood from corrupting his son, the same way it has corrupted every other god he has ever encountered. He doesn't know the right words to say, so he doesn't say anything at all. Kratos is a flawed character. Just like he didn't know how to deal with Atreus' illness, he also doesn't know how to deal with Atreus' corruption. Except this time, he can't just bring the kid to Freya and beg her to fix the problem for him. This time, he has to figure it out for himself. Next, let's watch the scene where Kratos finally puts his foot down.
You will listen to me and not speak a word. I am your father, and you, boy, are not yourself. You are too quick to temper. You are rash, insubordinate, and out of control. This will not stand. You will honor your mother and abandon this path you have chosen. It is not too late. This discussion is far from over. We are here because of you, boy. Never forget that.
Finally, after hours of bad behavior, Kratos disciplines his son. But it's really important to examine exactly how he disciplines his son here. We've already seen an example of bad parental discipline in this game. The last time we saw Modi, before he was murdered by Atreus, he had been beaten, bruised, and bloody by his father Thor for the death of his brother, which he wasn't even responsible for. This is an example of bad discipline. My child is doing something I don't like, so I'm just gonna beat the crap out of them. Keep beating them until they stop doing what I don't want them to do. This kind of heavy-handed corporal punishment is probably at least partially responsible for why Magni and Modi turned out to be such terrible people. Kratos is harsh with his son, but he's also communicating clearly here. He says, very explicitly, without going overboard, without physical or verbal abuse, this is what you are doing wrong, and this is why it is wrong. This is what you're going to stop doing, and this is how your behavior is going to change going forward. And it works. Atreus' behavior immediately begins to improve. This is how Kratos can blunt that godly corruption, A mixture of good, productive discipline without abuse, without going too far, combined with open communication and
Wrong way.
honesty. It also helps that the two of them have to work together to escape Helheim, have to save each other's lives. But Kratos still isn't being totally honest. He still hasn't been honest about his past, even after Atreus sees an apparition of Zeus in Helheim. So now let's fast forward all the way past their journey through Helheim, past their journey between realms, past their battle with Baldur, during which, by defeating this narrative foil to themselves, they also thematically get to defeat the worst version of themselves too, past Baldur's death. If you want to hear more of my analysis on those moments, you can watch my Baldur video. In the sparing and then killing of Baldur, Kratos demonstrates two kinds of character growth. First, he demonstrates his new capacity for mercy when he spares Baldur's life when he is no longer a threat. But then he still kills Baldur, and that demonstrates a different kind of growth. He gives Baldur the chance to be better, to make a better choice. And when Baldur refuses that chance, that's when Kratos actually kills him. Not for vengeance, not out of anger. This is a controlled decision. This is a decision made calmly to save lives, to make a better world. This is Kratos learning what kind of man he wants to be, what kind of god, how he wants to use his power. Kratos will always excel in violence. He will always be a fighter. He can't change that about himself, but he can change how he uses that violence. And in this moment,
I just remembered I'm not here to grind for money.
protect Freya. That is him choosing to use violence for
I'm here to
good,
grind for
violence
level.
to destroy evil, to protect people worth protecting. It is a far more controlled form of violence than we've seen him employ in the past. This is violence as a scalpel, rather than violence as a megaton hammer. Next, let's watch the scene where Kratos displays one last surge of character growth, when he finally stops hiding and chooses to be fully honest with his son.
You were just an animal. Passing on your cruelty and rage, you will never change.
And you do not know me.
I know enough. Does he?
Boy, listen close. I'm from a land called Sparta. I made a deal with the god that cost me my soul. I killed many who were deserving. Many who were not.
I don't want to level Unag too.
I watched your father in hell. Is this what it is to be a god? Is this how it always ends? Sons killing their mothers? Their fathers?
No. We will be the gods we choose to be. Not those who have been. Who I was is not who you be. We must be better.
This is an extraordinary moment for his character. This is the moment when he defeats the final boss of the game. Except this time, the final boss isn't some big scary evil god like Ares or Zeus. This time, the final boss is his own flaws, his own inability to confront his past, to be honest about his past mistakes. In this moment, he overcomes that. He grows as a character. He becomes a truly better man. It's inspiring stuff. It's so fascinating that at this moment of change, the greatest change he has ever undergone as a character, he is accused by the mourning Freya of being incapable of change. It's another one of these inversions of expectations. You would expect, when Kratos finally succeeds and changes, that he would be celebrated for it, that other characters would recognize and understand that change, but that's not what happens. Instead, because that character growth involved the death of her son, Freya views him as a monster. It complicates the moment in such a compelling way. As the audience, you get to feel excited for Kratos that he is growing, but that excitement is marred by the tragedy that has just taken place. A mother watching her son die right before her eyes. The writing in this game is so good. This isn't just good writing for a video game, even most books I read aren't this well written. Kratos' line
You have
here,
not
"I
read
killed
enough
many
good
who were
books,
not
my good
deserving,"
sir.
is a little bit of an understatement. The game kind of presents it as if killing his father was his worst sin, and maybe in the context of a story about fatherhood and raising a son, especially a son he has been in conflict with at certain points during this story, that is the most important reveal. But to be frank, Zeus was an asshole. Zeus was one of those who deserved killing. It's the killing of people like Perithous or that man on the burning ledge or Poseidon's princess that I would like to see Kratos reckon with. If I have any criticism of this game's story, that would be it. I would much rather see Kratos emotionally grapple with the killing of so many innocent lives, rather than spend so much time grappling with the killing of his father, which doesn't feel like as big of a deal to me. Moving on, the key here is choice. They can choose to be better. At the start of the story, I don't think Kratos believed that he or his son really did have a choice. He thought that they were cursed by godhood, that it was inevitable that his son would live the same life of tragedy and violence as every other god of the series. But here at the end, he's realized that there is a choice, that they can be better. They can choose to be merciful and unselfish, but they have to be aware of that choice first. They have to fight against their worst selves. They have to fight against that pull
What did I
towards
class ES
selfishness
again?
and abuse of power.
Right.
It's not something they can solve in a single day, a single journey, a single choice. They have to keep making the right choice
The
every
main
day
class
for
is
the
Monk
rest of
actually
their
kinda
lives. This is a conflict that will never be over. They will always be at risk of making the wrong choice again. But at least now, Kratos knows that there is a choice, and so does his son. Moving forward, the boys finally reach Jotunheim. Kratos gives Atreus his mother's ashes to carry on this final leg of their journey, which is a really touching moment, demonstrating how much more he trusts his son now than he did back at the start. Inside the mountain, they discover that the giants prophesied their entire journey. And not just the giants, but Atreus' mother too, because she was a giant. She set up this entire journey for them both to be able to grow, to both become the better gods they needed to be. Kratos realizes that Baldur was looking for her, not for him. And more importantly than that, he realizes that in some small way, Lefay was with them all along throughout the entire journey, because this was a journey she foresaw, that she prepared. Kratos also sees the prophecy of his death, which he doesn't react to much here, but does play a major role in guiding his decisions in the next game. But we'll talk about that more when we get there. In the final scene of the game, Kratos and Atreus spread Lefay's ashes together. The most important part of the scene is portrayed very subtly. Not much attention is drawn to this small detail. Notice how casually, how easily Kratos rests his hand on Atreus' shoulder in this last scene. Remember at the start of the game, how much Kratos struggled to demonstrate that physical affection? And now it is so easy for him that the game doesn't even bother drawing any attention to it at all. That shows how far he has come since the start of the game. But Kratos' incredible transformation is not finished yet. This is only part one of his journey in the Norse world, where he learns to make a better choice not just once, but to keep making that better choice day after day. And it's a journey that will be shaped by the prophecy of his death that he saw inside the Mountain of the Giants. His need to prepare his son to survive without him. This analysis will continue with his story into God of War Ragnarok, but not today, because this video is already really long. So I will see you again in part 2.
So, why do you want to name me Atreus? That can't be for God.
No, he was a soldier, a Spartan.
Great warrior?
All Spartans are great warriors. We trained from birth. Our lives were discipline, duty, battle, and death. Life was grim, and we pleaded it grimly. But Atreus of Sparta was unlike the rest of us. He wore a smile even in the worst of times. He was happy. He inspired us to hope that though we were machines of war, yet there was humanity in us. Goodness. When the day came for him to lay down his life in battle, his sacrifice saved countless others and turned the tide in our
Luvobi's not very tough for a Hoplite. I figured it would be a good subclass considering she's seemingly very tough. You know, she has even more HP than a Hoplite. Like, how does that make sense? She's mostly naked. I wonder if Jacksepticeye played the second game. I never actually saw anything about the second game when it came out. I don't think it's a good idea to fight any of the bosses. I will use a pet here though, cause why not? There's only 24 hours, but taking a single camp break shouldn't matter. How annoying. Sure, she doesn't have ailment healing yet. Enemies also really love targeting Luvobi. Maybe it's just because she's so damn irresistible. ain't going well at all.
God of War 4's story is all about family, about parents and their children, about how children are shaped by their parents, and this seemingly impossible task that parents face in trying to raise children to be better than themselves. This is the task that Kratos faces in raising his son Atreus, to raise his son to be better than the monster he used to be. And it's also a story about love, a parent's love, and the two-sided nature of that love. A parent's love can be uplifting, enriching, transformative. A childhood with a lot of love should be a happy childhood. But parental love can also be stifling. It can be overprotective and overbearing. A parent's love is often tied up in feelings of fear for their child's life, anxiety for their future. This fear can lead a parent to push too hard, to control too much. In the center of all the game's themes of parents and children and love and fear is Baldur. Baldur is first and foremost a fantastic villain. Baldur is a wrecking ball. He crashes into Kratos and Atreus' life out of nowhere, shatters their sense of normalcy, their sense of safety. It's Baldur who actually launches them on their adventure. Laufey's dying wish is for Kratos and Atreus to scatter her ashes on the highest peak in the realms. But Kratos refuses to start on that journey. He feels that both he and Atreus are not ready. But when Baldur invades their home, Kratos has no choice but to leave. So in some ways, Baldur is responsible for everything that happens in this game. Baldur's voice actor Jeremy Davies puts on a huge performance in this game. By comparison, I think Kratos, Atreus, and Freya's voice actors all have much subtler performances. Baldur's is super broad. He's fun to watch and listen to. Every time he's in a scene, he totally takes over that scene. He comes off as emotionally unstable, even slightly insane. Every time he shows up, something breaks, usually a lot of things. He is angry, he is violent, he is powerful, he is dangerous. Even after all the dozens of gods and mythological monsters Kratos has slaughtered over the course of his long, god-killing career, the developers still managed to make Baldur feel really dangerous. At the start of the game, Baldur seems invincible because that's exactly what he is. Thanks to the effects of a magical spell or curse, Baldur is unkillable. But with all that said, what makes Baldur a truly great villain, and one of my personal favorite villains in any story ever, is how well he fits into the story's themes. The way his story enhances, complicates, and deepens the game's themes of parents, children, love, and hate. Because Baldur is also a son. He is the son of Freya and Odin. And while we don't get much information about his relationship with his father, we do know that his life was totally shaped by his relationship with his mother. Freya loved her son deeply, loved him more than anything, but this boundless parental love, instead of raising Baldur up, raising him into a good man, instead it ultimately destroyed his life, turned him bitter, resentful, and hateful. Freya received a prophecy that someday Baldur would die a needless death. She could not accept this. She loved her son too much to let him die, to let him go. She loved him too much to let him live his own life, to face death on his own terms. So, in an act of desperation, an act that was fueled by both love and selfishness, love for her son, but a selfish need to not allow herself to be hurt by his death, she cast a spell on Baldur. This spell made him invincible. He could never be hurt again. He would never die. This should have been awesome. Never having to worry about getting hurt or dying is pretty sweet. But the spell had other effects too. The spell stripped him of nearly all his senses. He could not taste, could not smell, could not feel. Sure, he can't feel pain, but he can also never feel pleasure. For the rest of his life, which will be forever since he can't die, he will never feel anything ever again. Could you imagine how empty life would be without ever being able to taste food? Never able to feel warmth or softness, no physical pleasure whatsoever? But that's really not the worst of it. It would be one thing if Baldur chose this for himself, if he decided on his own to sacrifice physical pleasure in exchange for physical invulnerability. But he didn't get the chance to make that choice. Freya decided it
This game
for
is
him.
too
She
weak.
cast the spell without even asking him what he wanted. Her true mistake wasn't casting the spell, it was that she did it without his consent. That's how we know it was a selfish decision, that she did it for herself and not for him. If she was doing it for him, she would have asked him what he wanted, but she didn't care what he wanted. She only cared about what she wanted, which was to not lose her son. And as noble a motivation as that might be, it doesn't make what she did right. Ironically, she lost her son anyway. In her attempt to save his life, she ended up ruining his life. In her attempt to keep him by her side forever, instead she ended up pushing him away forever. Over the decades, Baldur's bitterness and resentment curdled into a dark hatred, and he became determined to murder his own mother in revenge for what she had done to him. But let's get back to Kratos. Kratos is terrified of raising his son the wrong way. He is intimately familiar with the ways that godhood and the incredible power that comes with it can spoil people. The way it can turn them selfish, indifferent, even merciless towards those less powerful than themselves. The gods in this series tend to commit terrible and evil crimes. Kratos himself is a god with a history of rage and violence. He himself has been selfish, indifferent, and merciless. He has killed not just evil gods, but innocents too. He has been a monster. He doesn't want that for his son. He wants his son to live a better life than he did. So, Kratos' father was Zeus, and Zeus was a really bad guy. He was manipulative, murderous, uncaring, possessed by the evils of Pandora's box. It really shouldn't be that hard for Kratos to be a better father to Atreus than Zeus was to him. All he really has to do is be present for his son's upbringing, and then to not literally murder his own son. And just like that, Kratos is a better father than Zeus ever was. But in Baldur's story, we see another possible failure of parenthood. With Baldur and Freya, we see that it's possible to love too much, for that love to be selfish. And Freya's brand of overbearing parental love can be just as disastrous as Zeus's callous indifference. In this way, Baldur represents a potential future for Atreus. If Kratos fails as a parent, in all of the hundreds of ways it's possible to fail as a parent, this is what Atreus could become. Bitter,
I'm going to the
angry,
lower floors.
resentful, violent. Gods wield too much power to make mistakes in their upbringing. When a god is raised wrong, it has consequences for the whole world. The stakes here are really high, and it even almost happens in the game. As soon as Atreus discovers that he is a god, that he is powerful, he begins to lose his compassion. He starts to treat everyone around him worse. He outright murders Modi. In this moment, we're seeing an Atreus who turns out a lot like Baldur. But not only is Baldur a potential future for Atreus, he is also a kind of foil to Kratos himself. Back in God of War 3, Kratos was a character who had been manipulated and betrayed by his father and the other Greek gods. He was filled with bitterness and anger and rage. He was consumed by hatred. He became obsessed with revenge. His only purpose in life was the death of his father, Zeus, and anyone else who got in his way. Doesn't that sound a lot like Baldur in God of War 4? Baldur also feels like he has been manipulated and betrayed by a parent. Baldur is also filled with bitterness and anger and rage. He has also sworn that he will kill that parent. In a lot of ways, these are kind of the same character. The difference in the present is that Kratos is older, that Kratos has had time to find other things to live for besides revenge, has found people he cares about, has come to regret the man he once was. So Baldur is a foil to both Atreus and Kratos. At the end of the game, when Kratos and Atreus face off against Baldur in the final battle, Atreus is facing off against his worst possible future, while Kratos is simultaneously facing off against the darkest parts of his past. And so, when they defeat Baldur together, and it's really important that they do it together, they're also thematically defeating these worst versions of themselves. They are both thematically overcoming their worst selves. From here, I want to watch each of Baldur's scenes in the game, because they are all phenomenally well written, acted, and animated. These cutscenes are a masterclass in cinematic video game storytelling, and we can see how the developers and writers are building
I didn't
Baldur's
mean to
character in the scene. So
use
let's
double.
start by watching Baldur's explosive introduction. At this point in the game,
Whatever,
Kratos
may
has
as well live
refused
with
the
this.
call, refused to embark on the hero's journey. He doesn't feel that either he or Atreus are ready for the journey. He has chosen to stay where he feels safe, and then here comes Baldur to force him to make a different choice.
I thought you'd be bigger. But you're definitely the one. Long way from home, aren't you? What do you want? Oh, you already know the answer to that. Whatever it is you seek, I do not have it. You should move on. And here I thought your kind was supposed to be so enlightened, so much better than us, so much smarter. And yet you hide out here in the woods like a coward. You do not want this fight. I'm pretty sure I do. Leave my home. You are going to have to kill me for that to happen. I warned you. Finally. You would not listen. My turn. How incredibly disappointing. Come on then.
The first time I ever played this game, Baldur totally kicked my butt in this fight. The game up to this point had been pretty easy, just a tutorial really, and then all of a sudden you're thrust into this boss fight against some crazy guy who just does not care how many times he gets punched in the face. I only ended up winning by the skin of my teeth. There's this awesome moment during the battle where Kratos is throwing Baldur. In mid-swing, you get this close-up on Baldur, and he is actually laughing because he cares so little about the beating he's taking. It's a fantastic boss battle, and I think this was the moment that I fell in love with this game. But let's rewind back to the start of the scene. What does Baldur want here? Odin has sent him to track down Laufey, Kratos' wife, the last giant in Midgard. To complete this mission, all Baldur has to do is say, "I'm looking for Laufey," and then Kratos could say, "She's dead, there's her body, see you later." Then they both could have moved on with their separate lives. If all Baldur wanted was to do Odin's bidding, then that's all he really needed to say. But Baldur doesn't really care about that. That's just an excuse for him. He very intentionally starts a fight, not to complete Odin's mission, not to prove anything, but for another and much more selfish reason. At the end of the fight, Baldur says, "I'd hoped that you, of everyone I faced, would finally make me feel something, but you can't." That's Baldur's true motivation at the start of this scene. He wants to finally feel something. For all of his talk of, "If you'd only told me what I wanted to know, this wouldn't have happened," it's not true. This confrontation was always going to end in a fight, because that's what Baldur really wanted. Baldur knows who Kratos is. He knows Kratos' reputation. Kratos has slaughtered like an entire pantheon of gods. If anyone in the world has the power to actually make Baldur feel pain, it would be Kratos. Or perhaps it's even darker than that. As we'll see later, Baldur doesn't just want to feel pain. He wants to die. He wants someone to kill him. He is deeply unhappy. He is sick of living this life. And Kratos is a god killer. Kratos is the god killer. No one in the world has killed more gods than Kratos. I think Baldur actually wanted to die in this scene. I think what he really wanted was for Kratos to kill him here. I always thought that moment when Baldur is lying on the ground muttering to himself, no, 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 was really weird. Like, what is he saying no to? No what? But if he actually wanted Kratos to kill him, then that explains his strange reaction. As soon as he gets punched, he realizes that Kratos does not have the power to kill him, doesn't even have the power to make him feel any pain. This is a huge disappointment. That's why he makes the turn to actually trying to get the information Odin was looking for. Whereas before, all he wanted was a fight. But let's rewind again. Back to that very first shot we see of Baldur. I absolutely love this character's visual design. Visually, he is immediately interesting. Firstly, because he's shirtless in the freezing Scandinavian winter, but also because his body is covered in these absolutely gorgeous tattoos and runes. What I find interesting about these tattoos is that they don't really have any visual flow or aesthetic. There's no larger interconnected design to them. Instead, they're kind of scattered all over his body, almost randomly. They are visually cluttered and chaotic, almost on top of each other. And of course, this parallels the chaotic, scattered, messy nature of his character. Baldur is chaos, and you can see that reflected in his visual design the very first moment you see him. Fans have translated some of the runes on his tattoos. Apparently, the red ones on his back say, cursed. The ones on his arms say, never forgive. The circular one on his chest supposedly says something to the effect of, I confide the light within myself that I might feel something. And the runes on his neck say, I mark the sunset of the gods, which are all thematically appropriate. He is also really skinny, even kind of lanky and scrawny. He doesn't look as strong as he actually is. He's not nearly as muscular or big as nearly any other god we see in this series. Partly this just reflects that he probably doesn't eat very much, since food is not a pleasure to him. But I also think the developers wanted Baldur to appear unhealthy. There's also those huge dark circles under his eyes, and his skin is nearly as pale as Kratos is. These also contribute to his unhealthy appearance, which matches the deep sickness within his character. His first lines, I thought you'd be bigger.
I am this team is just straight up
are all meant to show that
for this
Baldur
kind
knows
of thing.
exactly who Kratos is and exactly where he came from, even though both the audience and Kratos himself have no clue who Baldur is yet. This informational imbalance makes him seem all the more intimidating. I think it's also really important that it's Baldur who throws the first punch here. Baldur is intentionally vague about what he's looking for. Like, how the heck would Kratos know what he's looking for? He wants to start a fight. Next, let's watch the moment when Baldur reveals his inability to feel.
When Odin sent me here, I just needed answers, but you act all proud. Throw whatever you have at me. I'll keep coming. That old body will get out. But before I end this, I want you to know one thing. I can't feel any of this.
I just completely adore the voice actor's delivery of that line. The way he says, I can't feel anything. There's a hysteria in that line. Listen to the way his voice goes up in pitch, the way his voice sort of wavers. It's almost as if he's about to either burst out laughing or burst into a terrible, screeching scream. He sounds completely insane in this moment. And I think there really is an insanity lurking within Baldur's mind. This character is mentally and emotionally unwell. His sickness is hatred. He is so angry and has been angry for so long. that it has made him both physically and mentally ill. This battle ends with Kratos actually snapping Baldur's neck. Baldur may be invulnerable, but apparently his neck can't be broken, and that will incapacitate him for at least a little while. Baldur's next appearance is at the top of the mountain, where we see him interrogating Mimir and leading Magni and Lodi in the search for Kratos. It's actually the only time in the entire series where we see Baldur interact with any other Aesir. He's not very impressed with them and calls them both idiots. He clearly doesn't care about them much either, since he never comments on their deaths later. We're gonna skip right past this and over to his next appearance, which occurs a couple hours later, and also takes place at the summit of the mountain. Beautiful, isn't it?
I remember once. Mother, look out!
Run, boy. Cross the bridge.
No! I'm a son too! I can do this! Get off it!
Well, then let him go. Take me instead. I'll do my own shot. All this time, I thought I needed you. The boy's brains.
No! You broke the gate! That was our only way to unite!
Stupid son of a bitch.
Get out of here, boy.
Yes, by all means, Junior, run away. Let Daddy do all the heavy lifting for you.
Ah! Let go!
Calm down, boy. You are not ready for this.
I am ready!
And here I thought my family was fucked up. Your father is right. You are far from ready. He'll give you some time to close this for me. Thank you.
Earlier, I described Baldur as a wrecking ball, someone who charges in out of nowhere and just immediately wrecks everything. And you can definitely see that aspect of his character in this scene. Something else on display here that we haven't seen much of before is Baldur's sense of humor. It is a dark and mean-spirited sense of humor, but a lot of what he says here is genuinely pretty funny. Like when he says, "The boy is the brains," or when he just sits back and lets Kratos and Atreus fight amongst themselves, or that delightful little twirling wave he does when he says thank you. This is the only scene in the game when Baldur actually seems to be kind of enjoying himself. The only scene where he expresses any emotion other than anger. I think what we're seeing here is probably Baldur's normal self. This is how he behaves when he's in control, when things are going his way. This is probably how he interacts with his family at home in Asgard. His dialogue here reminds me a lot of Heimdall's dialogue in Ragnarok. They both have this insulting, mocking, sarcastic, biting sense of humor. However, whereas Heimdall is more of a preening, narcissist bully, I think Baldur is a much darker character. There's so much more anger within him. Baldur feels more dangerous to me, like he might descend into a violent rage at any moment. Heimdall had a lot more control over himself and his emotions. I really wish we had an opportunity to see Baldur interacting with the rest of his family. I'd be most curious to see how he interacts with Odin and Thor in particular. Do you think Baldur would behave as submissively towards Odin as Heimdall does? Do you think there exists any brotherly affection at all between Baldur and Thor? It's too bad we'll never know. Anyway, Baldur flies away on an armored dragon, and then Kratos leaps onto the back of that dragon. As the battle begins, Baldur has already lost all of that humor and silliness he was showing before. In a rage, he yells, "Don't you know when to give up?" And later he cries out, "Why won't you die?" He sounds really frustrated when he says those lines. As soon as Baldur isn't in total control of the situation anymore, his humorous and sarcastic facade vanishes, and he is overwhelmed by his anger again. I think he's the kind of character who isn't used to losing, isn't used to not getting his way. Baldur has probably never lost a fight before, never had this much trouble completing a mission, and it infuriates him. Next, Kratos slices open the dragon's wings, and then the dragon crashes into Tyr's temple, and Baldur attempts to open a portal to Asgard to summon help in his fight against Kratos. There's a very small moment during this next confrontation that I want to watch, so that you can hear the way Baldur's voice actor delivers this specific line.
No! Listen to me!
Let go of it now, or I'll kill him. No, I won't. What did you do?
Listen to the way he says, "Let go of it now, or I will kill him." No, I will. Doesn't he sound so freaking menacing here? He sounds terrifying. Something that I haven't really discussed much in this analysis so far is that Baldur really is a genuinely evil character. We've talked a lot about how he got screwed over by his mother and how crappy his life has been because of his loss of physical sensations. But Baldur is a bad guy, and his past does not justify that. I don't doubt for a second that Baldur really would have murdered Atreus here if he could. Baldur is willing to murder children to get his way. He is a terrible person and a dangerous person. There's this line in their very first encounter when Baldur says, "I'm not my brother," and he's referring to Thor. He's claiming that he's not as bad or destructive a person as Thor is. But I think Baldur is actually a much more dangerous character than Thor. As terrible as Thor's sins are, the god of thunder doesn't strike me as a child murderer. After this, Kratos, Atreus, and Baldur all get trapped in Helheim. Part of the torturous magic of Helheim is that your worst memories get replayed for you over and over again on an endless loop. So Atreus sees himself murder Modi, Kratos sees Zeus, and Baldur sees his mother. And this is one of the most interesting scenes in the game, because not only do we get to see Baldur confront his mother over what she did to him, but we also get to see a younger Baldur, a far less angry and emotionally sick Baldur. And we even get to compare the two versions of him side by side. So here it is.
Stay out of sight.
Right, I am your mother.
That no right, bitch. I can't taste. I can't smell. I can't even feel the temperatures. This is feasting, drinking, women. So God.
Again, death has no power over you now. You would rather die?
Yes. Take it away. Please.
keep going until I at least know I might rank in one of the number
What
3.
you did to me! Ah! Ah!
The most fascinating part of this scene to me is seeing the differences in behavior between Baldur now and his past self, both emotionally and physically. Let's start with his physical behavior. We can see that his past self, despite being very upset, very emotional, is physically pretty calm up until he grabs his mother's throat, which obviously isn't very chill at all. But before that moment, he's not bouncing around, he's not shadow boxing, he's not flying all over the place. Physically, in his mannerisms, in his animations, he's not behaving like the erratic Baldur we know. Now, look at his present self. Look at the way he is bouncing around, the way he paces constantly, like he can't stop moving. Look how much frantic energy there is in his present self animations. This is where we learn that Baldur didn't used to be this way, wasn't always so frantic and emotional and wild. Back then, he didn't just have control over his emotions, but he had control over his body too. This change is representative of an emotional sickness that has gotten much worse over time. The other big difference we see is how much angrier Baldur is in the present. Back then, Baldur was really upset. He was desperate. He begged his mother to take the spell back. And in the grip of these intense emotions, he grabs his mother by her neck. But he doesn't kill her. He relents. He doesn't really want to hurt her. His anger, his hatred, his obsession with revenge had not consumed him yet. In the present, Baldur is desperate to kill his mother. Instead of begging for her to take the spell away, he begs his past self to murder her. He even starts screaming and wildly punching her apparition. And the scene ends with Baldur collapsing to the ground and weeping. He is so pitiful here, so pathetic. Baldur is a broken man. He is sick and has been sick for a very long time. One mark of really good writing is if the writers can manage to get you to feel sorry for the villains, especially for a villain as dark and violent as Baldur, and the writers totally nail it in the scene. I felt so bad for him here, and what feels worst of all is that I don't think there's any hope for his character. He is so angry and so emotionally sick. What can be done for him? How could he ever heal from this? The only thing I can think of is that he would need to do what Kratos did at the end of God of War 3, which is to just disappear, vanish over the horizon, try to build a new life somewhere very far away from his family and his sins. Next, let's fast forward to when Baldur and Freya finally meet in the flesh for the first time in 100 years.
I had a feeling hurting the big snake would bring the two of you out in the open. Do you have any idea at all, what you have cost me?
My boy.
Mother.
I'm here. Don't run away.
Oh, I'm not going anywhere, Mother.
I know that you're still angry. I know that how you feel hasn't changed, but I want you out.
How I feel? How I feel? I've spent the last 100 years dreaming of this moment. I rehearsed everything I ever wanted to say to you, every word, to make you understand exactly what you stole from me. But now, I realize I don't need you to understand anything. I don't need you at all.
Back off, Kratos. This has nothing to do.
This path you walk, vengeance, you will find no peace. I know.
You This again.
What exactly is Baldur referring to when he says, "Do you have any idea what you have cost me?" My first thought was that he was just referring to losing his dragon, but on second thought, I don't think so. I doubt his dragon mount was really all that important to him, and I suspect he could get a new one if he really wanted to. Instead, I think he's referring to his experience in Helheim. When he saw that vision in Helheim of himself confronting his mother, that must have torn open a very old wound for him. It reminded him how humiliated he felt back then, how desperate, how his mother had not only betrayed him, but then told him that eventually he would thank her for doing it, which is an infuriating thing to hear. It reminded him how much he hated his mother, how broken he was inside still. In this line, I think he's referring to the emotional toll of traversing Helheim, which he blames on Kratos. This is probably the worst possible time for Freya to attempt a reconciliation. Baldur has been having a terrible day. In Helheim, he was just reminded how much he hated her, how much he wanted her dead, and why. I do wonder if, under different circumstances, he might have been more open to speaking to her, but right now, he is far too angry to even give her a chance. I also think Baldur is actually pretty sympathetic in this scene. Freya really isn't nailing this apology.
Where the hell are all the
She
links?
said
Why
what
is
she
it
said
just
to
the
Kratos
worst
earlier,
enemies
that she
I'm
recognized that her
encountering
spell
right
was a
now?
selfish choice, that she knew she had hurt him, that it was her fault, that she wanted to make it up to him somehow. He might have been more receptive. Instead, she stumbles into saying the absolute worst possible thing. And I do think Baldur's anger here is justified. She stole a lifetime of feeling from him for her own selfish reasons, and still hasn't apologized for it. Thinks she can just randomly waltz back into his life and expect him to be okay with that. Part of what makes Baldur such a well-written villain is how sympathetic he is. He has been wrong. He does deserve some kind of justice. But at the same time, he is so twisted inside, so angry, so violent. Some of that, maybe a lot of it, is his own fault. We cannot control what is done to us, however right or however wrong, but we do have some control over how we respond to those things. We have control over how we treat others. Baldur is a character who treats everyone around him terribly, horribly. He is an awful person, and Baldur is a character who is given chances to be better. In this final sequence, he is given opportunities over and over again to make a better choice. Like right here when Kratos is being so genuine with him, empathizing with him, telling him, "I've walked this path before, I know how it ends, I know that it sucks, don't do this." And each time Baldur chooses to keep being the same angry person he's been for the last century. Next, let's jump ahead to when Baldur is freed from his magical curse.
This won't be pretty.
I won't let you hurt him.
No boy.
Fine.
Stop! No! Atreus! You're bleeding. Breathe, boy. Breathe.
Not my blood.
What is that? I can feel this. I feel everything.
Vulnerable now?
moment, Baldur finally gets everything he wanted. He has his senses back. He can feel everything again. He can feel pleasure. He has his life back. He can go out and live his life again. He can go do everything he ever wanted to do. But watch his face in this scene. Watch how the expression on his face changes. Look how it goes from a sort of wonder, and then right back into that angry expression he's been wearing for the whole game. Even now, at what should be his happiest moment, when he has a chance to let it all go and move on and be happy, instead it is swallowed up in this bitter anger. Baldur is a character who is weighed down by his anger. He cannot get out from underneath of it, even at what should be his happiest moment. The rest of this fight is totally awesome, both from the sense of spectacle and scale, the mechanics, but
How much
also
more
from
do
a
I have to
character
kill?
perspective. This battle is the first time Baldur has felt anything in a century, and he loves it. He is overjoyed. There's this weird mix of fury and elation in all of his lines. He's totally pissed off at Kratos, but at the same time he loves the feeling of battle. He loves the pain, the ice, the burning. He is ecstatic. The character is experiencing a really unusual mix of intense emotions during this battle, and the voice actor is doing an awesome job of conveying each of them to the audience. I really can't say enough about what a fantastic job Jeremy Davies does in this game. Finally, let's watch Baldur's death scene to see how this villain meets his end.
Do it!
Stop. Please.
You will not come for us again. You will not touch her.
I don't need your protection.
Huh? Oh, okay. Yeah, I officially give up on this quest. This team sucks too much.
Help yourself. Can you move? No matter what I do or say, you won't stop interfering in my life.
I was just trying to protect you. I